Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on Resource Conservation 101. We are just getting ready to get started, so you should be seeing a screen right now that says GoToWebinar Attendee Controls, and we're going to give everybody just a minute or two to get situated and allow a few other people to call in. It's right at 11, so we generally like to give a minute or two for people to join us. But I just wanted to say thank you for being here with us this morning and through this afternoon. And we've got a number of presenters and panelists here that are going to be sharing some information on local programs and policies related to energy, recycling, water conservation, and on the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy and ways to get involved with that. So we're glad that you were able to join us today. I'm going to go ahead and give everybody just another minute. If one of the first things that we will do as part of this presentation is we'll be going through how to use the GoToWebinar controls. So I have a couple slides on that I'm going to start with in just a minute. And one of the things that I did want to share with everybody here, just as we transition with a number of speakers and with the PowerPoint and with an interactive webinar that we've put together here for you today, sometimes it does take a second to launch a poll or switch a screen, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention that it does take a little bit sometimes, and you might see a delay in some of the things that are going on. All right. Well, with that, I see that everybody is muted and we are good to go. I guess we are going to go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to our webinar today on resource conservation. Just a few housekeeping things that we're going to go through. This is a 2-hour webinar that we've put together for you at no cost, and we're going to be covering the topics of the 4 R's, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot, as well as energy efficiency, water conservation and systems, and pollution prevention. We don't take breaks during the webinar, but if you need to, feel free to get up, and the webinar will continue, but we'll have a recording of the webinar available later. The things that we're going to cover today are topics. First of all, we're going to introduce you to the basics of resource conservation. We're also going to be sharing quite a bit about local programming that's available to you. We're going to connect you to where to find out more information locally, how to tap into some of these programs. Hopefully, we'll to enlist you as a future Recycleworks Volunteer Academy volunteer and send you out into your community to help create some change and to share what you've learned with other people in your communities or that you work with. So that's what we'll be doing. And our speakers today, we have myself, of course, I'm with Go2Zero Strategies. We also have Jackie Falconio with the County of San Mateo and Megan Waters, who's also with the County of San Mateo. And as each presenter comes up to start their part of the presentation, I'll provide a bit more information on their background. So first of all, what I want to share with everybody is how to use the GoToWebinar functions, just so that you become a little bit more familiar. So first of all, attendees are all muted. You guys are all muted right now, and we can't hear any of your background, but we will unmute you as we go to Q&A segments. Also, the other thing I want to let you know, is that the system monitors attentiveness. So obviously, it's not required that you pay attention to this session, but the system does monitor what you're doing on your end and has a lot of interactive features to it that will allow you to hopefully be engaged with this presentation as we go through it. So the one thing is that everybody needs to have their audio pin input, and it does look like everybody's done that, so we're fine. The other thing is that you can participate both using your audio and visual through the functions, and we've got a great group here. It looks like everybody's plugged into using that, so I have a feeling most of you have utilized this before. But I want to make sure that everybody's familiar with the navigation bar and that you know how to utilize it, because that's where you will be able to ask questions and participate. So the first way that we're going to have some interactivity for you is through polling questions, and we do have a number of polling questions that we will randomly share with you throughout the presentations. When they pop up, we'll usually let you know there's a polling question, and then you'll see a screen like this pop up. And basically, you just use your mouse or your keypad to go ahead and select the answer, and that will record it on our end, and we can see as people are participating in the polls. So you'll generally hear me say, well, you know, we've had half the people respond, you have a couple more seconds, and then I'll say I'm getting ready to close it, and that's your last opportunity to participate before we shut it down. The other thing that we're going to do is we will have Q&A segments, and there's two ways for you to participate in the Q&A. You can either raise your hand or you can type a question in the question box. So this slide right here identifies, the top one shows where you would raise your hand up on the little, it's a little slide out bar up at the top. And if you raise your hand, then we will open up the, we'll unlock your microphone so you'll be able to ask a question. Or if you just prefer to type something, and you can type it in the question box, and then we'll read it off and respond. The question box is also, there's a couple places throughout the presentation where we'll ask you for some input that we're going to be looking at and using as part of our presentation. So you would type those responses into the question log there, and then we'll be able to take a look at those. So actually what we're going to do right now is we're going to practice the polling. So what function of GoToWebinar allows the moderator to track and mute attendees? And I don't know that if I actually gave you this information, but go ahead just for purposes of testing, and I'm going to launch this poll, and you can select a response and basically get some practice in. So I just launched the poll. You should see it popping up on your screen. I see about half of you have voted. Okay, last call for anybody who hasn't voted. We're going to go ahead and close this. We got everybody. Great. Okay, and then what I can do is I'm able to share. So everybody should be seeing the poll results right now. 33% of the people said speaker, 67 said audio pin, and audio pin's the correct answer. So this just gives you an idea of how we use the polling function. Let me close that. All right. So this is our agenda for today, and it looks like we're basically right on track. We're going to start with an introduction to the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy. Then we'll have the energy presentation, followed by the solid waste and recycling, the pollution prevention, and we'll end with our water presentation, and then we'll do a small wrap-up. So right now I'd like to introduce In-Sue Lim, who's with Recycleworks Volunteer Academy and the County of San Mateo, who's going to talk about our programs.
Great. Thanks, Judy. So hi, everyone. My name is In-Sue Lim, and I'm with the County of San Mateo's Office of Sustainability. And thank you, everyone, for participating in this webinar today. Next slide, please. So the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy, RVA, is part of the Office of Sustainability's Recycleworks program here at the county. And Recycleworks promotes resource conservation in the county through the development and implementation of many different types of programs that we have here, such as our green building program, our construction and demolition program, and school programs. And Recycleworks, we used to be part of the Public Works Department at the county, but a few months ago we merged with the county's Office of Sustainability. It's kind of a baby department. Very excited to have an official Office of Sustainability here at the county. And now under the Office of Sustainability, Recycleworks will continue to work with the members of our community and the 20 local jurisdictions to bring our programs to your doorstep. Next slide, please. So through the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy, RVA, the Office of Sustainability is offering no-cost resource conservation courses to you, the members of the San Mateo County. And the program's goal is basically to educate and train our community members and to empower you with all the necessary tools and the knowledge and the skill sets for you to be able to go back out into your communities to promote sustainability through volunteerism. That's really our main core objective. And this program year's RVA offerings, it includes webinars like the one that we are having right now, and 2 8-week in-class courses on resource conservation, compost, and solid waste. Both started earlier this year, but we are offering it every year. And we also have single session workshops. So the next the Green Building and Green Business workshops are actually coming up. We also have Webinars Plus. It's our new add-on. It's focused on sustainable transportation. Very exciting. It's a new element for our program this year. And we also have that kicking off next week. Our first webinar is going to be on the 10th. So we have more information available about those offerings, about those 2 workshops and the sustainable transportation series. If you want to go on our Recycleworks website, there's more information there. Of course, you could feel free to get in touch with me. I'd be more than happy to talk more about these offerings. Next slide, please. And so there are 3 core members of the RVA. So Jola Marianne is providing high-level program oversight and direction for the program. Ken Springer in the middle, he's the overall program director, or I'm sorry, program manager for the RVA. And I, on the right, I coordinate the day-to-day operations of the program. And we're also working very closely with Cascadia Consulting Group and their team to develop and implement the RVA program this year. And our RVA program is working hard to make sure that our community members have the opportunity to take full advantage of this great county program. Next slide, please. And back to you, Judy.
Sorry, I had myself muted. Okay, so today's webinar, as we discussed, we're going to kick it off with energy efficiency, followed by solid waste and recycling. We'll cover some pollution prevention, and we'll end it with water conservation and water systems. So we are going to go ahead and get started with Jackie Falconio. Jackie is a resource conservation specialist with the County of San Mateo. She graduated from Sonoma State University, where she double majored in energy management design and economics. She focused her studies on the design and practices of energy efficient buildings while directing her electives towards local government urban planning. She interned at a local nonprofit agency, Solar Sonoma County, and worked at Tesla as a product specialist to assist opening a new store in Marin County until late 2014. She's now working for the San Mateo County Energy Watch, spearheading their zero net energy initiatives in the county by providing trainings and developing a county-wide strategic plan. She also assists local school districts to utilize their state funding for energy efficiency projects. So welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, if we could go to the next slide here. Okay, first off, I wanted to kind of go over who provides our energy here in San Mateo County. So here we have PG&E, who is an investor-owned utility, and they are regulated by the California Public Utility Commission. The goal of the investor-owned utilities in California is to provide safe, reliable energy at a reasonable price. So the utilities here, they own the generation and distribution infrastructure throughout their territory. So in all the blue area here on the screen, PG&E owns all of the lines and transformers and power plants in that territory. We go to the next slide. In PG&E territory, our energy mix is actually fairly good as far as emissions go. So you can see that in the PG&E chart on the right-hand side that none of our energy comes from coal production in PG&E territory, whereas in the U.S. about 42% of all energy provided comes from coal. But in PG&E we have about 22% of our energy comes from renewable energy at this point. We can go to the next slide. There's also a new system coming to California that worked at a couple other counties and is on the way in San Mateo County. It's called Community Choice Energy. It's where the the CCE or the CCA purchases electricity from renewable sources and uses the infrastructure of the current utility to send out this renewable energy to their customers. So it provides renewable energy at affordable rates, and it's a little bit more of a local control for those clean energy. Next slide. Here's our first polling question. A utility company, for example, PG&E, will encourage you to practice energy efficiency. True or false?
I've gone ahead and launched it. So,
great.
Wow, we got everybody voted very quick, so we're done. Let me go ahead and share that.
Perfect. Everybody got that one right. It is true. And then if we go to the next slide, Judy.
Get there. There we go.
So PG&E is what we refer to as a decoupled utility. And what that means is that the utility's profits are not from the sale of energy. So this makes the utility almost indifferent to selling the actual product. Their costs come from maintaining the infrastructure, so all of the transmission lines and power plants, turning on power plants, things like that. So a decoupled utility is great for energy efficiency and for distributed generation, which is smaller, localized clean energy, like renewable on a rooftop or a small wind farm. Decoupled utilities really promote energy efficiency and distributed generation because it allows them to not turn on their large, expensive power plants. These charts you can see here on this slide, over the last 100 years, California's population has spiked dramatically, but on the right-hand side, you can see that though the population has increased, our per capita energy use has actually remained pretty flat over the last 30 years. So that's really showing the amount of energy efficiency that has occurred in California, because in 1975, people didn't have computers and cell phones and all those electronics to charge. So we're really doing a good job of keeping that kilowatt hour per person usage down in California. Next slide. As a general term, what does energy efficiency actually mean? It's the idea of using less energy to provide the same service. So the idea is that you're not going to be having to give up your amenities or give up any of your lifestyle, but you'll be providing that at a lower energy usage. Next slide. Meeting future demand. So the population in California is continuing to increase, and we have to figure out how we can provide energy to everybody in the next 10, 15 years. So how are we planning on filling in this new supply in California? The number one go-to option is energy efficiency and demand response. So we want to be able to use less energy first rather than turning on other power plants or even renewables. This is the absolute cheapest way to provide energy to everybody that's going to be in California. Renewables is definitely the second best option. And then as a last resort, we would revert to conventional efficient fossil fuel generation. So that would be like natural gas or even nuclear power. That's not ideal. Funding for energy efficiency. So every month on your PG&E bill, if you look closely, you will see that there's a public goods charge on your bill, and that comes from the state. So that money goes to the California Public Utilities Commission, and they allocate that fund to investor-owned utilities like PG&E here. And then PG&E has to use those funds to provide energy efficiency programs to the local communities. And that goes to commercial, residential, industrial, and agricultural communities for different energy efficiency rebates and incentive programs. Next slide. So there's a few policies in California that really support the energy efficiency work that we're doing here. We have AB 32, Global Warming Solutions Act, which is monitoring greenhouse gas emissions. So originally the goal was to be 15% below 2005 emissions by 2020, and recently at the end of 2015, that goal was upped to 80% below 2005 levels by 2050. We also have the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which requires that all utilities in California have at least 50% of their energy portfolio to be renewables by 2030. We also have our building code with Title 24 in California that is requiring some very strict energy efficiency practices in building. So in the residential side, all new residential construction must be zero net energy by 2020. And on the commercial side, it's all new commercial by 2030 must be zero net energy, which means that the building produces as much energy as it consumes with renewable power over the course of a year. So that could be through solar panels or wind, anything like that. Next slide. So here's our next polling question. Which type of energy do homes in San Mateo County use more of, electricity or natural gas?
We're almost there. We're waiting for a couple more people to vote.
Okay.
There, we've got it.
Oh, 50-50. Okay, we could go to the next slide there.
Yeah.
Natural gas is actually the correct answer. Here in San Mateo County, we use a lot more gas because of heating, whereas most of our county doesn't need air conditioning for the large majority of the year. And gas is the primary use of gas is heating sources. This gives you an idea. About 61% of our energy consumption in San Mateo County is from gas. Next slide. Okay. So energy use in homes, what uses natural gas versus electricity? Things like your heater, if you have a furnace, that's going to be natural gas. Gas stoves, that's a big one here as well. The large majority of electricity usage comes from our electronics. Our appliances do use quite a bit, but there's always Energy Star rated appliances and things like that, but we don't think about our TV or our computer that they're plugged in all day. Even if they're in sleep mode, they're still pulling a small amount of energy at all times so that you can just press power and it turns right on. That's what we call a vampire power or a vampire load. It's always there no matter what. Even if it's off, if it's plugged in, it's pulling a little bit of energy. Next slide. So this is not a true or false question, but if you could type in the box, what do you think are the most cost-effective upgrades to save energy in your home? What would be the first thing that you would go to? And Judy, if you could read out some of the answers as we get them.
Right. So go ahead and in your question box, just type a response. So our first one was insulation. We've gotten, anybody else have any ideas? Okay, we didn't get, oh, here's another one. Conservation, reducing load.
Okay. It's a good one. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, I'll show you the top 10 or 12 most cost-effective upgrades for saving energy in your home. The number one is duct sealing, which nobody thinks of really, but sealing the space in between your ducts as they fit together, that's one of the biggest losses of heat in your house. Attic insulation, insulating hot water heaters and pipes. So adding a foam barrier around it or something. It's not always foam, but so these are the kind of things that are inside your walls, that you're not going to see every day. A lot of people go to windows first or anything, and that's actually one of the least cost-effective upgrades that you can do. Inside your walls is really where the most important upgrades happen. Next slide. Home energy factors. So there's really three main factors that contribute to your energy usage in your home. So your home energy assets. So that's going to be your walls, your insulation, your attic, the physical building of your home, and then everything you put inside of it. So appliances, computers, TVs, printers, game consoles, all those things that you plug in at some point. And then the third factor is your behavior, and that can be the biggest contributor of all. If you're leaving everything on all the time, you leave your house with your heater and all the lights on, it doesn't matter if you have, a really efficient furnace. If you leave it on constantly when you're not there, you're still going to have a high energy bill, and you're still going to be consuming a lot of energy. So these are the three main factors that you need to hit. So in San Mateo County, we have a few different residential energy efficiency programs. So for low income, there's the Energy Savings Assistance Program through PG&E, which is El Concilio. There's also a moderate income through El Concilio, which we help with in my program, the San Mateo County Energy Watch. It's called the MIDI program, the Moderate Income Direct Install. Homeowners Association, so I know that there's a lot of apartment or condo buildings around here, townhouse complexes. There's a turnkey lighting program for all the common areas of those buildings that we run through our program with Ecology Action. And then there's the single family and multifamily programs through BayREN, which is the Energy Upgrade California program. Next slide. So this slide is going to be slowly out of date here, coming soon, but this is currently how the tiers and pricing works for PG&E's energy for your home. So you use the energy you use at the beginning of the month is going to be less expensive than the energy you use at the end of the month. So as you move from left to right, you're moving from Tier 1 to Tier 2, and it's basically disincentivizing you from using energy reaching into that third tier or that fourth tier. The large majority of people in San Mateo County are hitting the Tier 3 and Tier 4s for almost half the month sometimes. So it can really bring your costs up. PG&E is going to be moving to a two-tiered rate. So it's going to be the same concept, just less variability over the month. Next slide. So why do we want to focus on energy efficiency? Why don't we want to just put a big solar panel on top of your roof? So this is two homes who use the same amount of energy, really. So if the home A, that's your average build, uses about 6,000 kilowatt hours per year, that would need a pretty big system to provide energy all year round. And it would cost about $19,000 to provide solar for what you need energy for. And you need a lot of roof space for that. You need about 450 square feet for just the panels, and that's not including any of the transformers or anything like that. But if you look at home B, which is an efficient build, it's using half that energy, and the cost of the system is half. It's only $9,000. So your payback is going to be a lot better, and it's actually more feasible to fit on your roof. You're not going to be worrying about trying to fit all these solar panels in every last nook and cranny of your roof space. So focusing on efficiency of your building first is really the most cost-effective and smartest way to go about energy efficiency. So here we've listed some resources if you want to learn more about any of energy efficiency programs or tips. The Recycleworks website is a great resource, so San Mateo County Energy Watch. And that will lead you to our programs with Ecology Action and a lot of work with our cities that we do. And then the other big one is the Energy Upgrade BayREN website. That they have a lot for residential opportunities for both single-family and multifamily residences. And you can always sign into your PG&E My Energy account, so you can sign up for that really easily. It should be on the information should be on your PG&E bill, and that allows you to see when you're using energy on your meter. So if you can see if, oh, hey, I'm leaving the heater on while I'm at work or something like that, it allows you to really fix the behavior side of the energy efficiency whole picture. Next slide. I think that's it. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask me, this would be the time to do so.
I'm not seeing any questions come up right now. This is a great time. I don't see any hands raised, but if you're on the call and you're interested in questions about any of the programs, this is a great time to ask Jackie. And we are ahead of schedule as well. Okay. Oh. We actually did have a question come up right now. So Ellen Barton says, what about multifamily?
So multifamily, there's a couple of programs. The Bay Ren Home Energy Upgrade California, they have some resources for multifamily units. There's also our program with Ecology Action where we can provide, it wouldn't be to your actual unit, so it wouldn't be in your house, but we can provide energy upgrades for your lighting and even your HVAC equipment for all the common areas of the building, which are becoming more and more common. So any pools or outside exterior lighting, all your common, lobbies or hallways, all that area we can provide. And then you can still log into your PG&E My Energy because you have your own meter in a multifamily, so you can still look at your own usage. So that's a big component, is being able to control your own usage a lot more.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Okay, and here's Jackie's contact information in case you'd like to contact her following the presentation. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. I was looking to see if we had any other last-minute questions come through. So thank you, Jackie, for being a part of the presentation. And we're going to go ahead. We're actually ahead of schedule, so we might as well just keep moving on. The next section is actually going to be on solid waste and recycling, and I'll be covering that. So as I mentioned earlier, my name's Judy Gregory, and I'm with Go20 Strategies. I'm a contractor with Cascadia Consulting who is contracted through the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy to put together some of the training that is going on in the county. So I have worked in the solid waste and recycling field for over 25 years now. I primarily work with businesses and communities around the state on zero waste strategies and programming. And I've also spent a number of recent years predominantly working in developing training and curriculum for organizations. And most of that's focused on sustainability, resource management, and zero waste. So I'm going to be going over our first section on solid waste and recycling, and then I'll also be covering our segment on pollution prevention. So where we're going to start off is basically what is solid waste? Basically, you know it as trash or garbage. What are the things that we're throwing away in our trash? It's not something that many of us really spend much time thinking about. You know, we just put it in a can and it disappears and there's not a lot of thought about it. But when you start to look at what are those materials, things, stuff that we're throwing away, well, it's durable goods like appliances, electronics, furniture. It's non-durable goods, which we consider clothing, paper, disposable products, stuff that we buy. It's a lot of containers and packaging. It's also quite a bit of organic material, which would be food and plant debris. And then there's construction material and debris going in there. And so when we really look at it that way, we realize that the stuff that we're throwing away isn't really trash. It's something that's lost its value to the user, the purchaser, to us. But that doesn't mean that it's lost its value in a resource management system. So what we're trying to do, and what a lot of communities around the state and around the U.S. are trying to do, is to really shift this mindset away from solid waste into thinking about things as resources. Landfills haven't always been around, but how we've dealt with waste has transitioned quite a bit, and a landfill has become a big part of that. So today we're going to look at different aspects, including how waste is created. We're going to look at national and local trends on our disposal. We're going to learn about landfills and kind of how they've evolved to meet our needs today and how we'd like to change how they're involved. And finally, we're going to look at how we can manage resources through reducing, reusing, recycling, composting, and other activities locally and in our homes. So in nature, everything is in cycles. Our Earth is a closed loop system, and we don't have waste naturally occurring because there's no way. So in nature, the Earth naturally uses all the waste byproducts from one system to fuel another system. And the idea of waste creation is something that's relatively new, and it's based on human culture. And so what we're learning is that we need to find better systems for managing our waste and processes that can more mimic nature instead of just throwing them in a hole. So basically, in the beginning there was no waste, and we've learned that in nature there's no waste. But our modern society, we generate and dispose of these wastes, which are really resources. We just call them waste on a daily basis. But what we really need to do is think about how we can more properly manage them. And these are things like products, packaging, our food leftovers, and landscape and agricultural byproducts. That is a large portion of what type of materials are going into our landfills. So some examples would be metal. So metal is a material that, rather than going into the landfill, can be used to create new products. It's very easily recyclable. It has a high value, and the energy savings associated with recycling metal versus mining new metals is extremely huge. So that's one of the things associated with recycling, is that we do have a lot of embedded energy or energy savings associated with that, and water savings as well. A bicycle, rather than tossing that old bike out, it's something that can be repurposed. It can be repaired so that it can be used in its original state, again saving a lot of energy. And then even things that we would think, well, food scraps off of our plate are definitely trash. What can you do with that? Well, we can actually compost it, and we can make a nutrient-rich amendment for soils that is very beneficial to our soils, and it helps with water conservation. So this is where that whole mindset changes of, instead of throwing something away, how can we use it within our system to bring value? So how is garbage created? Well, basically waste is the leftovers that we dispose of, but like we've been talking about, it doesn't mean that it's garbage. So we all have things that we no longer need or that will lose a value to us in their original version or their original form, but it doesn't mean that we have to throw them away. The truth is that most of the things we actually throw away would have a value in an SRM system, and the EPA estimates that 75% of what we throw away is recyclable, even though we only recycle 30% of it. So what happens is when recyclable or reusable or compostable materials are thrown into the garbage, they then go into a trash truck. It's compacted and mixed together and so degraded in that process that then we can't effectively reuse, recycle, or compost them once this has happened. So this is what we term solid waste. And solid waste doesn't include things like industrial byproducts, chemicals, or liquid waste. So those are collected separately, they're disposed of differently, they're handled differently, but when we talk about the term solid waste, we're usually talking about this material right here that comes from our home and businesses. Okay, so we're going to get to some of the Q&A. If you would like to share something that you regularly throw away, that you want to know how you can eliminate or find alternative products, go ahead and type that into your chat box. I'll be taking a look at them, so if you think of something later, we can talk about it as well. And I'll definitely do my best to try and incorporate some of those questions into our discussion later. So somebody just put in plastic bags used for vegetables. So we'll get to that. We're actually going to have a section on plastic bags later. And if you have any other ideas, type those in and we'll refer back and forth to those as we go through this presentation. And it's just a great opportunity for us to share what are some of our challenges in our day-to-day resource conservation activities. So SRM, that is Sustainable Resource Management, and basically there is a hierarchy to how we manage our resources. A lot of us have heard this term, reduce, reuse, recycle. It's a term that was coined in the 1970s, and we've probably all heard it, but most of us participate in the recycle part of it and don't necessarily, when we think of reduce, reuse, recycle, we're mostly focused on the recycle aspect of it and not necessarily on the first two. We also have a fourth term now that's more recent that we call ROT, which is another term for composting, but allows us to create the 4 R's. And when we talk about ROT, we're basically talking about the same thing as recycling, only it's the recycling of organics, such as green waste and food waste, because it's the same process of taking one material in its original form and processing it so that it can be used for something else. Okay, so we're going to go over each of those reduce, reuse, recycle and talk a bit more about them and understand that there is a reason that we have them in the order that we do, reduce, reuse, recycle. And truthfully, the importance should be primarily placed on the reduce, then on reuse, and then on recycle because of the importance of them. So waste reduction is at the top, and it's because it's actually the best way to save resources, because if we don't use them in the first place, then we've really saved the most. So by reducing what we use, we're reducing materials consumed to create those products, we're reducing the need to dispose of them later, and we're reducing all of the necessary water, energy, and time spent making those products as well. So that's why waste reduction is so important. And some ways that we can do that by packaging. That's a huge one. Commercial packaging is a very large waste of materials that don't really have any other value other than to transport and protect products and get them to us. And they have a marketing value as well, but such a limited lifespan they have. We can also implement policies regarding purchasing and contracts that will help eliminate waste. And redesigning products is huge. We see a lot of new products coming out that are being made smaller, more efficient, more durable, and then ultimately banning products that are problematic. So some of the things that you can do to help reduce waste would be installing low waste landscaping or grass cycling, replacing light bulbs with energy efficient, eliminating disposable ware. I can't tell you how many people use paper plates and cups and disposable silverware in their home because it's convenient, but it's something that we can change that will help eliminate waste. And even replacing our toxic chemical cleaners with non-toxical alternatives. So those are things that we can do. Reuse is next on the list of hierarchy, and reuse really isn't new. It's something that's been around for a very long time, but kind of lost its importance after World War II which is when we started becoming more of a disposable society, convenient-oriented. But prior to that, you know, we reused everything. We made quilts out of old clothing, and, you know, nothing went to waste. Waste not, want not was sort of that term. So traditional reuse is common in a lot of different ways to us. Growing up, thrift shops and repair shops were everywhere. Thrift shops are still around, and they're kind of getting a facelift, so it's interesting and fun to see how they have managed to stay throughout the years but are getting transformed as we look at reuse being so important. Garage sales, swap meets, these are all things that are traditional forms of reuse that, that we've sort of been exposed to. And then today, some new forms, well, eBay is one of the largest companies in the world, and it's solely focused on reuse, or primarily, I should say, focused on reuse. What a great way to exchange. FreeCycle, Craigslist, and then even interesting ideas like Street Bank, and I know they go by other names, but where neighbors can share larger purchases. So maybe everybody doesn't need a lawnmower because you only use it you know, once a week, so you invest in things like that together and share it. So lots of really neat ideas about reuse, and creative reuse is another one. We see that a lot in nonprofits and schools now, taking on creative reuse where old materials are used for purposes of arts. And then finally, we're going to look at recycling and composting. As I said earlier, really the most common and most sort of understood piece of our hierarchy. And people like to recycle. It's sort of that active way. It's that feel-good thing that people can do when you put a bottle in a recycle bin. You just feel like you've done something. So it's a very important part of the equation. We do need to recycle materials, but we also need people to feel that sense of involvement and community associated with it. So recycling is wonderful for that, and it is a great way to conserve natural resources and reduce pollution. One of the amazing things about recycling is that almost every material that we recycle has an energy savings associated with it. So as you can see, when we recycle an aluminum can, we save 92% of the associated energy associated with making that aluminum can versus if we had to completely make it from raw materials, new materials. So all the way down the list, we save energy by recycling. And it's just something that people have become, people have come to expect. We want to see recycling in our communities, in our homes, in our and even at events, things like that. The other piece associated with recycling is the composting aspect of it. And as I said earlier, basically composting is recycling, but for organic materials. So things like this, food waste and green waste. Whereas when we think of recycling, we're predominantly thinking of traditional feedstocks like paper, cardboard, plastic, glass, metal. So, but organic materials can be other than food waste. They can also be crop residue, sewage sludge, animal waste. So all of this would be considered organic, and the ways we can process them can be through a number of different ways, from as minimal as just shredding and mulching them. We can compost them. We can process them in digesters or in windrows like this for composting. So there's a lot of different ways that we process our organics. All right, so I'm going to give you another opportunity to type something in your question box. And again, if you don't think of anything right now, but you want to type something later, you can. So think of an R that is important to you in eliminating waste. So we learned about reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot, but is there anything else that you can do or that you know of that can also help with resource conservation? And while we're here, I'm going to go back to a few of the other responses on materials that are hard for people to figure out alternatives for wasting. So someone said coffee cups. They have an invisible plastic lining. Can they be composted in San Mateo County? That's a great question. and I'll respond to that now. Usually that material is not compostable unless it specifically says compostable on it. There might be some local organizations that purchase the compostable product that is associated, but for the most part, those are not the best for composting or recycling, and they can be problematic. So my suggestion is to bring a reusable mug, and a lot of businesses that sell coffee are now offering incentives to bring your own mug. I know that some of them will give you like a 10-cent saving on your cup if you bring your own cup. So that's a great alternative and something to think about. Another one was foil-lined oat milk cartons. How come they can't be composted? So any of the layered materials, so we see them in the aseptic packaging, any of those types of things where a foil or a plastic has been put together with a paper or covered with some, it used to be wax covering, but now most of those, it's a thin plastic that goes over them. It's a very different product. Technologies have changed. Most of those are not recyclable or compostable. They're very problematic, and you know, sticking them in compost bins, part of the material may compost, but what happens is when the compostable piece of it separates from the non-compostable would remain in the compost pile. So in this instance, even though I don't know the exact product you're talking about, I can picture it. The foil would then break down, would be in the pile that is being broken down through the process of composting, but the foil remains, and removing the contaminants of compost are very challenging and problematic to the product, and they really degrade the product. So those are just some of the issues and why it's so important for us to not only participate in recycling and composting and programs that are available to us, but to really be cognizant of what are the do's and don'ts, and there's reasons that sometimes they may be different from one community to another, because some products are composted using windrows, other products might be composted in a digester, which is a very different process. So all of these different processes are associated with different forms of contaminants and different ways that they break down the material. Same thing with the recycling center. You know, some can take glass and some can't, because in some of the processes the broken glass is very problematic on equipment. Plastic bags is another one. I hear that a lot. How come some communities allow plastic bags in our recycling and others don't? It has to do with the equipment. This equipment is very expensive, and plastic bags can jam the equipment. So it's really important that when you are participating that you're taking a look at what is acceptable and allowable and what's not, and conforming to those, and the things that can't go in the recycling or composting bin, then really looking at them from more of a personal perspective and saying, you know, why is this in my trash bin, and you know, what can I do to eliminate this? Okay, so let's look at a few other questions. How to recycle or compost old sheets. One of my suggestions on that would be look at animal shelters. A lot of animal shelters will, they want old blankets and sheets for the pets, and they will use them for a long time. I know that many of the thrift stores, especially Goodwill is a big one, they will take in all old clothing, sheets, blankets, any textiles, and the ones that they actually don't resell. So what they do is they sort and they put a lot of the material out for resale, but the materials that they don't are actually shipped generally overseas, and they are, even when they're oftentimes not resellable here, they're still usable by people in other countries, and at the very least then there are recycling processes, or not recycling but reuse processes, where even low-grade textiles can be made into other products. They can take cotton and make paper out of it. So there's a lot of things that happen with it. So I would suggest if you don't have a local shelter or animal shelter to donate them to, Goodwill is always a great option. And like I said, don't think that they're throwing away the stuff that they're not putting out for resale. Okay, so I have a few more good questions in the chat box, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on just because I know we were ahead of time, but I want to make sure that we stay that way. So I'm going to move through a few more slides and then we will come back. All right, so I asked you guys to put in some R's and some ideas you had for R's, and basically just to kind of highlight that the R's have been used for education and marketing purposes for a lot of the programs. So it's sort of that hip, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot worked great, but even other organizations and schools are using it. There's lots of R's that are out there when we talk about ways to conserve resources and, this one, respect the planet, refuse it, that's a great one that's become very mainstream. Repair, refill, reinvent, rethink. So these are all ways to basically complement our resource reduction and resource conservation activities. But then there's a really important one that doesn't start with R, and it's zero waste. And this term has really come on strong over the last 10 years and has kind of become the mascot of reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. And it's really catching on around the globe. It's a tangible term. We get the idea when we're talking about, when we're in business, we talk about zero accidents. So zero mistakes, it's zero tolerance, well, zero waste. That's what we're shooting for. It's a goal. Will we ever get to 100% zero waste? Probably not, but it really sets the bar for us to look at what's that threshold of acceptance. Where do we want to get to? Well, we really want to get to zero. We don't want to get to 50%. We don't want to get to 60%. We really want to shoot for zero. We want to keep making changes in our system and in our choices that we personally make to strive for that goal. And when we talk about the definition of zero waste, we mostly are talking about three key things. We don't want to burn materials, we don't want to bury them, and we don't want toxics in our products. So if we can eliminate burning materials, burying materials, and putting toxins in them, then we can probably get pretty close to zero waste. Another important term out there is closed loop. You probably heard it. And it means a lot of different things in different businesses, but basically when we talk about closing the loop, we want to prevent waste by better design and better reutilization of our resources. We want to make sure that we have that resource management system integrated. We want to reduce the extraction of resources. And here's a graphic that I like. I know it's a little bit blurry, but I really like this graphic. It just kind of shows the system that we're used to is a linear system, and the linear system is the top parts of the graphic. So if you start from the upper left, raw material extraction, and that's where we basically mine for materials. And then those materials go into the material processing piece, which is right below it, and that's where we then get, the raw metal, the raw plastic, things like that. They then go over, if you see to the top right, manufacturer products. Those raw materials that have been processed for manufacturing then go into the manufacturing of products, and then we sell those products, and then we buy and use those products. And the tendency has been in the past to go in the upper right piece through disposal. And what happens is it's a linear system. As you can see, once you throw it away, then the picture kind of ends there. I mean, there are a lot of things that happen after that, and we'll talk about that when we get into the landfill section. But the better alternative is to go to the bottom right and to recycle those materials and put them back in the system, because you can see what happens as you recycle them. Then they can go one of two ways. You can then reuse them as they are, basically thrift shops, like we're talking about, reuse as is, or we can put them somewhere back into the process, either in the material processing or the manufacturing side, to make new products. So that's what's called closed loop. It's a circular system where it continues to go around and around and around, and we don't have that end of life that we see on a linear system. So here's a question for you, and I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, but let me read it first. In a closed loop system, what part of the process is generally eliminated or reduced? Okay, give me just a second to get in there. All right, you should see it pop up on your screen. I've got about half of you have voted already. Need a couple more people. Give you a few more seconds. One more person it looks like we're waiting on. If you've got your screen, pick an answer. I'm getting ready to close it. Yay, we gotcha. Okay. So about half of you said, 50% said raw material extraction, 17 said processing and manufacturing, and 33 said product packaging. So basically, in the closed loop, the part that is eliminated or reduced was the raw material extraction. That was the key one that was in the upper left, that we can greatly reduce when we recycle materials. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. We're going to talk a little bit about data. I just want to give you a few brief pieces of information. So the United States Environmental Protection Agency, also referred to as the US EPA, was created in 1970. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. It's an organization that tracks and covers many initiatives related to water, air, and waste. So they've actually been tracking data on solid waste and recycling for over 30 years now, and they do an annual report that releases this information. So the 2012 report noted that 251 million tons of trash are being generated each year in the U.S. That's about 4.38 pounds per person per day. And of this, about 87 million tons is either recycled or composted, and the rest is disposed through waste to energy or incineration. So it's about a 34.5% recycling rate. So we have about 21 million tons is composted each year, and we have 65 million tons is recycled. Then we have another 29 going to incineration and about 134 million tons going to landfill. So that just gives you an idea of the distribution of generated materials. And even though recycling has greatly increased over the last so 65 million tons recycled and 21 composted, and that is great, but the downside to it just is that the generation of materials in whole has dramatically increased. People are buying more and more and more stuff. So we still are outpacing our disposal at this time, even with the additional recycling that's going on. All right, let's look at the next one. So more locally in San Mateo County, the county per capita daily disposal in 2013 was 4.01 tons, and it's a slight increase in 2013 over the low point in 2010-2011 due to economic rebound, but overall it's a 31% decrease from 2004 when this tracking was done. And it's a total of 543,000 tons of material generated in the county, and that's about 28% below the 2005 levels. So you can see where San Mateo County sits as compared to other local counties as well. San Francisco in there at the lowest at 3.14 pounds per person per day. And then this is just even a little bit more detail. This actually gives the targets for each city within the county. As you'll notice, if you look in the third and fourth column, it's got the target and annual disposal in per pounds per day. And if you notice that the target is substantially different. So Brisbane has 16.9 pounds per person per day. Colma has 37.1 is the target, whereas say for instance, Millbrae has a target of 5.3 pounds. So that was based on original baseline data where the state looked at what those was being generated in those communities and identified targets at a even 50% for everybody. But you can see that even though the targets might have been high, that if you look under the annual column, you can see what the cities are actually doing as far as per pounds per person per day. So East Palo Alto and Foster City are way down there at say 2 pounds per person per day. And pretty much all of the communities have met their goal. At the time this graph was put up there, it might be a year or so old. San Carlos was the only one that was, 0.1 pounds off from their target, but pretty much every community in San Mateo County has met their target for disposal reduction according to AB 939. So one of the big areas for improvement is packaging and containers. It's one of the largest segments of our resource management stream, and the thing about recyclables is that packaging is that they're very common recyclables. So this report by As You Sow estimates that there's actually $11.4 billion worth of recyclables being thrown away each year just in the form of packaging, and that represents 40% of the U.S. waste stream. I've seen other estimates somewhere between 30 and 40. So it's a very, very large portion of our of what's being thrown away is just in packaging and highly recyclable materials. So if you're buying products that aren't comprised of highly recyclable packaging that can go into your either composting or recycle bin, then looking at those products and identifying if there's alternatives, if there's changes to personal practices that you can do, or looking for other means of recycling or reusing them outside of maybe just your recycling and composting bin in your home. So, and then as far as other products go, most products are highly recyclable. Doesn't mean that they're getting recycled, like we just talked about with packaging. So as you look at this chart, this is the rate at which materials are recycled. So lead acid batteries are way up there. The reason for that is there's a very steep cost associated with buying new batteries for your car, and so most people want to get that refund back and they turn their old batteries in. It's a pretty simple process. Other recycling processes require a little bit more participation by the individuals, and sometimes therefore they don't happen. But you can see, like newspaper, about 70% is recycled, yard trimmings over close to 60, but then when you start getting down into some of the more challenging to recycle, especially when you're on the go, like beverage containers, plastic bottles, things like the recycling rates drop. Even aluminum cans, highly recyclable, they were at about 55% diversion, and yet we can make new aluminum cans from old aluminum cans in about 60 days through a highly energy-saving process. And one of the huge things that we obviously want to do is look at not only the impact to extracting natural resources when we buy new products, but the harmful impacts to the environment as well. And plastic is one of those that has had a growing impact on ocean life through a lot of the plastic packaging that has come about in the last 30 or so years. Convenience packaging, on-the-go packaging that ends up in gutters, that ends up in storm drains, that ends up out in the ocean, and is really heavily impacting ocean life. So I know that you see that quite often in the news and in articles and things that are out there because it has become such a huge source of contamination to the environment. So And electronics is another big one. Electronics contain a lot of heavy metals and toxins in them, and it's illegal to dispose of them in landfills in California, but really making sure that these items don't end up in the landfill, that they get properly recycled is super important because of the huge threat that they pose. In this case, going into landfills means that then it goes down into our water and into our land and into our air as a pollutant. So there's quite a few steps and things that have been implemented in California that we're going to talk about over the past few years and how to properly manage these materials. But one big thing just related to waste reduction and reuse is to buy products that are going to last a long time. It's become more and more common to see electronic items, gadgets that just kind of come and go, that don't have a long life, that are something fun, you know, a little handheld video game. It's cute, buy it for my kid, and, you know, it breaks down 2 weeks later. And so those are the types of things that we can do on a personal level to make different choices related to those types of buying practices and purchasing practices, and look at making sure when we do invest in, you know, items like this that do have that level of contamination in them, that we want to buy products that are going to last a long time. So instead of buying, you know, that $300 TV because it's cheap, maybe saving up to buy something that's going to last a lot longer. And so that's really a big part of what's been going into working with retailers and with product manufacturers, is let's make products that are more durable, more long-lasting, and especially related to computers that can be upgraded without buying a whole new computer every 2 years. All right, so a few more things. Legislation in California that we have adopted, AB 939 is the one that set the diversion goal at 50% by 2000. That's been around for a while. But more recently, we added newer legislation in the state that you've probably heard about. So AB 341 is mandatory recycling for businesses generating more than 4 cubic yards a week, and apartments that have more than 5 units. So they need to implement recycling programs based on how much solid waste is being generated. And then AB 32 is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act, and that one basically said that through reductions of material going to landfills, we have to reduce 5 million metric tons of CO2, and a lot of other policies and practices have come out of AB 342, including the last one, which is AB 1826. This is one of our newest pieces of legislation that a lot of the communities are rolling out education and programs. And basically starting in less than a month, on April 1st of 2016, the first tier of businesses that need to comply will kick in. So if businesses generate more than 8 cubic yards a week of organic material, then they need to be implementing programs to reduce that, because the goal is to get organics out of landfill. All right, so a quick polling question. We're going to move on. Let me go ahead and launch this. Which of the following would not be considered solid waste? I'll go ahead and launch that. Okay, I'm getting ready to close it. All right. So 75% said food scraps and 25% said industrial chemical byproducts. So food waste actually is considered solid waste. Any of the stuff that we would normally throw in our trash can, food, diapers, styrofoam, all of that is considered solid waste. Industrial chemical byproduct is handled through other processes. All right, so we're going to go through a bit more kind of quickly here. Landfill basics. So basically we dispose material that you put in your trash bin is predominantly going to landfill in California. There are 2 incinerators, but I believe they're both in Southern California. is evidence going back to the time of hunter-gatherers that waste was created generally as a result of living in communities. We didn't have landfills, and we didn't really have proper ways of managing it. So that point at which we really started seeing any sort of regulated way of managing waste, and I use that term loosely, was about 500 BC, where in Athens, Greece, people started to recognize that it smelled and people were getting sick. So we want to put that stuff, you know, not in our backyard, but we want to put it a mile outside of the community so that we're not dealing with it. And that was kind of the first sort of, you know, evidence of people recognizing there was an issue with wasting. Obviously, a lot more regulation related to managing waste happened in the 1800s during the industrialization period. More and more people came to live in small towns and cities where there was a lot of waste being created, and the practice was mostly just to throw any trash out, you know, in the backyard or in the street, and the hogs would get it, the dogs would get it, it would kind of go away. But they started to realize that this was problematic as people were getting sick with bubonic plagues and cholera and all sorts of other diseases associated with unsanitary conditions. So that's when the waste management practices by local government started to kick in. But we actually didn't have our first modern sanitary landfill until 1934, and that was in Fresno, California. And since then, there have been a number of different practices related to regulating landfills. The landfill that's predominantly used locally is Ox Mountain. It has a capacity of 3,000 to 3,500 tons per day, but it's slated to close in 2040. So that's why we need to figure out ways to conserve what space we have left, because we don't want that space that we're going to need to run out. The great thing about Ox Mountain is that it does have an energy collection system on site, and it actually powers a number of homes in the local area in Alameda and Palo Alto. And they have a lot of other upgraded pieces to the landfill, like a leachate collection system where it's treated partly through the poplar trees that are grown on site, but they also have a treatment system where it goes in San Carlos. So lots of recent regulation and continuing upgrades to landfills to make sure that they meet the needs, but eliminate the effects of groundwater contamination and air contamination. Other local landfills are the Hay Road landfill in Vacaville and Newbie Island, and then there's transfer stations locally that take a material and transfer it out further. The key issues associated with landfills are two: methane and leachate. So methane is contamination to our air, and leachate is contamination to the groundwater. So what happens is when materials go into a landfill, predominantly organic like food items, and then it's covered and it goes into an anaerobic state, which is where it's deprived of air, the materials start to break down, and the liquid known as the leachate, like the gooey stuff, all mixes together and it goes down through the ground into the groundwater. And that's why you know, all new landfills since the 1990s have to have a liner, but there's obviously issues associated with how well those liners will hold up over the years. And the methane is a greenhouse gas. So when the material breaks down, it off-gasses out of the landfill, and some landfills have a collection system to use that methane, others don't, and they flare it into the environment. this creates greenhouse gas, which obviously we know has impacts on global warming and climate change. So the issue with methane is that it's 72 times more potent than CO2, which is the tailpipe emissions. So when stuff is coming out of the landfill, 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide, which is why it's been targeted through AB 32 for reduction, because it has such a huge impact on the greenhouse gas. Let's go through these. Yes, so landfills are the greatest source of methane, human production. 72 times more, and then we talked about, so leachate is what goes down through the bottom of the landfill into our water tables and can contaminate our water systems. So that is most of the information that we're going to cover on solid waste and recycling. The thing that I do want to make sure that everybody knows about is the Recycleworks.org website. Basically, and I'll show you a little bit more as we go on, but through the website, if you go to recycleworks.org, you can find out information on who your local hauler is, what they accept, if there's any special programs for recycling, lots of great things, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next section, but be aware of that. You can also call the hotline, and as I mentioned earlier, many of the haulers have their own websites with additional information. So when you go through recycleworks.org and click on it, it'll lead you to their websites as well. Okay, one more last polling question before we move on to the next segment. So how many times more potent is methane as a greenhouse gas as opposed to carbon dioxide? I'll launch this. All right, you should have your last poll of this section. Okay, got everybody to vote. Great, everybody got that right, 72 times more potent. So really important that we work on reducing methane out of landfills, especially through keeping food out of landfills. All right. Okay, so the last section that I'm going to be going over with you is on pollution prevention, which oftentimes is related to solid waste management because a lot of the materials associated with the pollution prevention programs are those generated in the household. Pollution prevention, or P2, is the act of reducing or eliminating waste at its source. And in doing so, we want to definitely promote the use of non-toxic or less toxic substances. And you'll see that a lot of the materials that we're dealing with when we're talking about pollution prevention are those types of materials that are toxic. And a big way to do this is to implement waste reduction or conservation practices or reusing materials. And a very big part of it is just making sure that there's adequate and convenient collection of these materials. In California, it's estimated that only about 10% of HHW, which is household hazardous waste, most of that falls under the pollution prevention auspices, but only 10% of it is actually properly disposed. The rest of it either ends up in the landfills or in the storm drains. And so it's really, really important we're recognizing that programs are convenient and that they're easy to access for residents so that they're able to participate in them. California has been very, very aggressive and progressive in the laws that it's adopted associated with materials that are hard to handle or hazardous. So the bottle bill is one of the first bills that kind of falls under this because many years ago when convenience was just sort of kicking in with the disposable cans and bottles, they were being thrown into the streets. People would toss them out their cars. So the bottle bill is one of those bills that was passed to sort of help prevent people, give them an incentive to recycle those instead of throwing them away. But as we've seen more recent years, lots and lots of new materials going into the waste stream that are very problematic, such as electronics, paints, carpets, and mattresses. So quite a few laws have been passed recently to look at how we keep those out of the landfill. Additionally, instead of just at the state level and laws being passed there, a lot of local governments are implementing policies. So some of these are like zero waste goals. Many communities have implemented plastic bag ordinances, polystyrene, which is styrofoam, bottled water, and pharmaceuticals. That's a very big one going on right now. So with plastic bags, the issue is that, again, it's single use, it's plastic, and actually they estimate that about 20 billion single-use plastic grocery bags are used in California every year. And a lot of these end up in landfills, but they also end up as litter and in our waterways. So very, very problematic material. It never biodegrades. It breaks down into much smaller and smaller pieces, which become a huge problem for wildlife and ocean life. And the thing is, it's very easy to do something in lieu of plastic. So reusable bags are great. It's definitely a best practice, and that's the goal, is to communicate to people to bring their own bags. And actually, San Mateo County passed its reusable bag ordinance in 2013. Another big one that I brought up was the pharmaceutical. So San Mateo County actually just passed its safe drug disposal program in April of last year. But again, it's so important. Things like sharps, needles, people are using these in their homes, and when they get thrown into trash cans, very high chance that it could hurt somebody, especially now that a lot of materials are being processed and recycled. They're being handled by people. So as things like that go through recycling or sort lines, there's a chance that somebody could get stuck with them. A big issue with flushing medications down the toilet or down the sink, which have health risks associated with them and contaminate the waters. So just lots of issues associated with pharmaceuticals, which is why communities have been looking at how we can have manufacturers of drugs be responsible. So it's called extended producer responsibility, and have them implement take-back programs so that people can properly dispose of the sharps or leftover medication in a convenient and non-costly manner. Another type of material that falls under the pollution prevention would be our e-waste and our hazardous waste, our household hazardous waste. Very common products that we have, obviously electronics, light bulbs, batteries, paints, cleaning products. All of these things shouldn't go into our trash can, because when they do, again, we talked about what happens in the landfill. The materials get mixed and squished in the liquids, and you really don't want all these things mixing together and then being a pollutant in either our air or in our water or on our land. Especially batteries and electronics have all those heavy metals, which include mercury, arsenic, cadmium, all sorts of things. So that's why it's so important to make sure that we have proper programming available. So this is, in the last couple minutes, what I really want to focus on is what types of programs are available to you here locally in San Mateo County. And I really have to say, San Mateo County has a wealth of programs. So very fortunate that there are so many opportunities to properly dispose of materials and manage them in a convenient way. So the HHW program helps residents dispose for many of these materials for free, and they can do it through a range of different activities or events. So they have the drop-off center, which is available Thursday through Saturday to drop off. It's a permanent site that residents can use. And then they also have special collection days for e-waste and hazardous waste throughout the county, so at like rotating non-permanent sites. There's also an at-your-door program offered by some of the haulers in the county. So on the website, there's a page in there that I will show you that has all the information to which haulers provide it and how you would contact them, but you can actually have the material collected at your door by scheduling it with your hauler. There's also a used oil program where you can get curbside collection of used oil, or again, you can drop it off at there's many sites throughout the county that you can find. In fact, most of the automotive centers will collect the used oil. For paint, Paint Care has set up a program with most retailers of paint in the state where you can bring back the paint, so you pay a small deposit when you buy paint and then you get to take it back for free. So again, the goal is to make all of these non-cost. And actually some of the used oil, you can actually get paid for returning your used oil. So tons of programs and convenient ways to properly manage and dispose of this material. And lastly, the retail sites. So more and more retailers, home improvement stores, places like Target and Walmart, you'll see that they have a place where you can drop off batteries or drop off light bulbs or drop off plastic bags when you go shop. And it's a convenient means for you to bring that stuff as part of your shopping. And of course, the goal is to get you to come into their stores, but it's a great way to do it. So lots of opportunities, other ways you can get involved, you know, just participate in local cleanup events in your community. Don't litter, keep your storm drains clean, make sure to clean up pet waste, and definitely don't put anything down the storm drains because those go straight to our waterways. So I know that Megan's going to hit more on that, but a lot of opportunities to participate in pollution prevention and proper management of hazardous waste in your community. Okay, one last polling question, and nobody's going to judge you, nobody will know what your answer is, but which of the following items have you improperly disposed of before because you didn't have convenient access or even know, that they were eligible for disposal through another system? If you answered that, the poll should pop up. We need a couple more people to vote. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. So I have a feeling a lot of you have not, but a lot of people have thrown batteries and light bulbs in the trash and hazardous waste. Exactly. I mean, we've probably all thrown some of this stuff into the trash at some point. And so just really important that we look for those opportunities to properly manage them. All right. And there's my contact information if you'd like to get in contact with me. And we are going to move on to the next section. I know there are some additional questions. While Megan is doing her presentation, I'm going to do my best to respond to a few of those questions that popped up, and I'll do it through the response box. So with that, I want to welcome Megan Waters. She is an AmeriCorps Civic Spark Fellow working in water conservation as a member of San Mateo County's Energy Watch team. Her current projects include a water auditing program for the county public schools and an evaluation of water savings for Foster City water utility rebate programs. She comes to the San Mateo County Energy Watch with an education in politics and environmental studies from Princeton University, and as well has a broad experience in regional transportation policy, conservation outreach and education, and invasive species mitigation. So I want to welcome Megan Waters.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, our last one. I'm excited to join us. Usually it's Kyle from the Bosca, and I'm glad to be filling in for him today. Let's see. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Okay, so we're going to start with an overview of the California drought, give you a little bit of background on what's been happening in our state. We're going to go over what the State Water Board and the governor has done to address the topic of the California drought. We'll talk about ways that you can conserve inside and outside of your home. We'll talk about a little bit about how to detect some leaks, and then we'll go over some available residential rebates and incentive programs offered by the water utility companies. So the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, BOSCA, has provided most of the content for this portion of today's presentation. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. To give you a little bit of background about BOSCA, they're a special district representing interests of 26 water suppliers, primarily in San Mateo County, but also a few water suppliers in Santa Clara and Alameda counties. Their service area covers most of the peninsula and the coast up until the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission service area, SFPUC, and covers the East Bay also up until the East Bay Municipal Utility District service area. BOSCA's service area encompasses roughly 1.7 million residents and over 39,000 businesses, all of which rely on the San Francisco Regional Water System, which we'll see in the next slide. One quick thing to note that Kyle thinks is a really important thing, and I agree. Despite our area growing in population by about 25% over the past 30 years, we've actually made huge strides in reducing our daily water usage by 10%. So we have some amazing programs, which we'll see later in this presentation, that have contributed to that reduction, even though we continue to grow. On the map, this shows the water agencies highlighted in color that fall under BOSCA's service area. On the right-hand side, though, we've only listed our water agencies specific to San Mateo County. If you take a hard look at the map, you might be able to tell which water agency covers your friends, your kid's school district, or maybe even your favorite restaurant. You'll see on the next slide the source of water for all these agencies is the San Francisco Regional Water System. So about 15% of our water comes from the local watershed. So most of that water is dedicated to emergency water supplies and is not directly available for drinking. The main reservoir on the peninsula is the Crystal Springs Reservoir, which is within that local watershed. The other 85% of the water available to us, and it's a majority of our water, comes from the Up County watershed there to the right on the map, which includes Lake Eleanor, Lake Lloyd, the New Don Pedro, and the Hetch Hetchy reservoirs. Most people have heard of Hetch Hetchy. The primary source of drinkable fresh water for this Up County watershed, in particular the Hetch Hetchy reservoir, is a snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains that melts down in the spring. Next slide. In 2011, we're looking at the chart here, we were at about 171% of the average amount of snowpack for the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Over the next 3 years, it fell consistently well below average snowpack, reaching an all-time low in 2015 of only 5% of the average. This has led to a dramatic decrease in the amount of water available and is the main contributor to the California drought, at least in the Bay Area. With this in mind, and with no foreseeable end to the drought, Governor Brown made an executive order last April telling the state water board to implement the first ever mandatory urban water limit in the state's history. As we'll see on the next few slides, urban water limits include conservation standards for water suppliers and specific regulations for residents and businesses. the goal of these standards and regulations is to reduce California's water usage on the whole by 25%. So looking at this slide, a conservation target standard or a local target is assigned to each water supplier based on the amount of water they use per capita. Water suppliers like the City of Daly City and East Palo Alto only consume about 45 to 50 gallons per capita per day and are assigned the lowest conservation standard, around 8%. On the other hand, water suppliers with high water use per capita, like the town of Hillsborough or Bear Gulch, are assigned the highest conservation standard of 36%. The idea is that water suppliers that consume the most water bear a higher proportion of the responsibility for reducing the state's water use, so that it evens out to about 25% savings for the state as a whole. In addition to conservation standards for water suppliers, the State Water Board also implemented regulations on specific water using activities that affect everyone, whether you're a water supplier, a resident, or even a business. I won't go over all of them, but some restrictions you may have already noticed in your daily life include having to request water at restaurants. You may not be allowed to water your lawns at certain time of day or on certain days, and you may not be allowed to wash your sidewalks or your driveways either with potable water. So before we get started and talk about residential water use and ways you can help conserve around your home, we're going to take a quick survey. What do you think is the largest source of water use in a single-family home?
Got about half of the people voted. We still need a couple more. Okay, here we go.
Oh, that's interesting. So most people thought it was showers. We got about 20% saying landscaping. As we'll see on the next slide, it is actually landscaping. This statistic is from, I believe it's from the EPA. This is for water use across the country, so it may not be California specific, but for the most part, single-family homes are using over half of their water dedicated to their landscape. This could be for several reasons. Lawns are very water intensive. Many people are not educated on how much and when to water their plants. And a lot of people have irrigation systems that are on a timer, and they don't change that timer based on the season or based on local weather, whether it's rained already. You'll see on the graph the next closest water users in the home are toilets and showers, which we'll see in more detail on the next slide. On average, for single-family households in our region, based on Cal Water data, most of the indoor water in single-family homes goes towards showers, faucets, toilets, and clothes washers. Not only do these fixtures require the most water per use or per cycle, they're also the most frequently used, so it makes sense that all the water being used indoors, most of that water is being dedicated to these fixtures. Okay, so now that you know where most of your water is going, what are some ways that you can conserve around your house? Well, outside, you can replace your lawn with drought-resistant landscape, which is actually a rebate program that Bosca offers, and we'll be talking about that later. You can capture rain from your roof and use that to water your landscape instead of using your hose or potable water. You can replace your irrigation control system, like I talked about in the previous slide. Most people have it on a time setting, but you can actually get a weather-based controller system. that accounts for rain, that accounts for especially dry seasons. You can replace your sprinklers with a drip hose, and inside you can replace your outdated fixtures with high efficiency models, and we have rebate programs for those, which we will see shortly. So this may seem like a lot of information. It can be a bit intimidating. It can be a bit overwhelming. How do you get started? How can you access more information or supplies to make these changes in your house? Fortunately, organizations like BOSCA and even your local water supplier offer this kind of support. There are free consumer education courses and online resources on topics like sustainable landscaping, water-wise gardening, and indoor water saving tips. And BOSCA and many of our water suppliers actually offer rebate programs and free supplies for their customers. Let's start by looking at some of these rebate programs and water conservation measures for inside your home. Shower heads. The standard shower head flows at about 5 to 8 gallons per minute. So think if you're taking a 10-minute shower, you're using 50 gallons of water in just one session in the shower. We can reduce that by replacing it with a low-flow shower head, which is only 1.5 to 2 gallons per minute. One of the main concerns people have with replacing their shower head with a low-flow model is that it won't provide the same amount of comfort, the same water pressure, but I can assure you that manufacturers have taken this into account, and they've actually developed flow control inserts called aerators, which mix air into the water stream. Because the air takes up space and there's less room for water to come through the fixture, the water flows at a lower rate, but with the same amount of pressure. If that's not convincing enough, you could also install a shutoff control valve, which would allow you to turn your water stream down to a trickle. So for example, lots of people like to shave in the shower. With a shutoff valve, you're only using the amount of water you need, which would be a trickle to rinse off your razor, and then you can turn it back up as you need. If you're curious about how much water you're using, you can take a 1-gallon bucket and time the amount of time it takes to fill up. If it takes about 15 seconds to fill the gallon bucket, you're probably flowing at 4 gallons per minute and could really benefit from replacing that shower head. So faucets actually use the same aerator technology as we found in the shower heads. Most faucets flow at 2.2 gallons per minute, gallons per minute, but if you install an aerator in your kitchen or your bathroom, you can reduce that flow to about 1.8 gallons per minute in the kitchen. You'd want to keep the flow rate a little bit higher in the kitchen for sanitary purposes, but in the bathroom it's not as important, and so a 1.2 gallon per minute or less would be better for the bathroom. Next slide. BOSCA and its participating members, so most of your water agencies, offer a high-efficiency toilet rebate program. To see whether your water supplier participates in this program, you can visit BOSCA's website, and they'll have a list of water agencies on each rebate webpage. This rebate is only offered for toilets that flush at 1.6 gallons per flush or more. So if you test your toilet, which we'll go over how to do in a second, if you test your toilet and it's already flushing at 1.6 or less, you do not qualify, unfortunately. But the good news is sort of that most toilets in the area are old. Most of the buildings are old, and so if you're replacing it, it's likely flushing at 3.5 or more. So what is a high-efficiency toilet? A standard high-efficiency toilet is designed to use 1.28 gallons per flush or less. It performs just as well as a high-flowing toilet. It removes waste efficiently, but you're saving water by choosing a low flow. Let's say you have one of those old toilets that I mentioned, the 3.5 gallons per flush. If you switch to 1.28, you could save up to 13,000 gallons per year. You also qualify for up to $75 rebate if you have a high-efficiency toilet. So just to go over again, a high-efficiency toilet has one requirement, and that is it flushes at 1.28 gallons per flush. Next slide. If you're interested in ramping up your savings beyond high efficiency, you can install a MAP Premium high efficiency toilet. It has more stringent requirements than the standard high efficiency toilet. It has to be certified to Environmental Protection Agency specifications, and BOSCA.org provides a list of these requirements, as well as a link to over 164 toilet fixtures that qualify as MAP Premium. So if you're thinking of replacing your toilet, great resource is BOSCA.org to make sure that you qualify for that rebate program. Through the rebate program, you are eligible to receive up to $125 in reimbursement towards your purchase. A MAP Premium high-efficiency toilet flushes no more than 1.1 gallons per flush, and most are at 1.0. That uses about 20% less than the standard high-efficiency toilet, and it also removes at least 600 grams of solid waste in a single flush. So again, it performs just as well as a normal toilet, but uses much, much less water. To see how much water your toilet is using per flush, you can check the label at the base or on the side of your fixture, but older models might not have this label, and sometimes the label is inaccurate if your fixture is outdated. To check the volume, remove the lid of the tank and make a mark at the top of the water line, and do the same for the bowl. You shut off the water completely, flush the toilet, take a gallon bucket and fill the tank in the bowl, and however many gallons it takes to fill both to the line that you just marked, that indicates your gallons per flush. Sometimes it's not your gallons per flush that's the issue. It could be a potential leak. Sometimes customers will look at their water bill and say, wow, there's no way we're using this much water. What is going on? It could be from a leaky toilet, which isn't always visible, but it definitely is detectable. To detect a leak in your toilet, you can either purchase or ask your water supplier for free dye tabs. The first thing you need to do is shut off the water flow to your toilet, drop a dye tab in the tank behind the toilet, and check back in 30 minutes. If after 30 minutes there is dye in the toilet bowl, you know there is a leak. It's gone from the tank down into the bowl. Most of the time this leak is caused by a faulty flapper. You can find that at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can actually replace it yourself. One of the other expansive rebate programs that BOSCA offers is in conjunction with PG&E, which is our electricity provider. It's for clothes washers, which tackles both water and energy efficiency issues. When you're shopping for a washer replacement, make sure the model you buy is on the Energy Star list as one of the most efficient options. This ensures that you'll qualify for the rebate of up to $150 from your water supplier. Again, visit bosca.org to see if your water supplier participates in this program. All right, let's talk about outdoor water savings. at your home. A couple simple steps is, instead of using water to spray off your sidewalk or your driveway, or any of your walkways, your patio maybe, use a broom. Sweep off all the debris. You can also use a hose with an automatic shutoff. So when you turn on a hose, instead of letting it leak everywhere, if you put a nozzle on the end, it allows you to determine how much water you want to use, how much you want to flow, and you can direct it where you want to spray instead of having it leak all over when you're not using it. A couple more steps to saving water outside. We suggest watering your lawns and your plants in the early morning or at night. That way the water you're using won't evaporate. It will actually go directly to the plants and your lawn. We also suggest testing your soil moisture. If the top 2 inches feel damp, you definitely don't need to you don't need to water your lawn. Many cities also have a watering schedule, which is about 2 days per week. In the rainy season, though, that could be overkill on the amount of watering that you need. You may end up not needing to water at all. So pay attention to the weather. If possible, adjust your irrigation timers. If it's within your means, definitely replace your irrigation control system so that it's weather-based, and that way you won't have to adjust based on the weather. The controller will do it for you. So this just reiterates what we said before. You take turns watering. Most cities you can water twice a week. So if every other waters on Monday and Thursday and everyone else waters on Tuesday and Friday, then we're making sure that we're conserving more water. All right, so we have some recommendations. We have some opportunities available through Bosca and through San Mateo County. One of these is the BayAreaGardening.org. It gives you tips on how to best use water, which plants need what amount of water and how often to be watered. So that'll help you if you're starting an outdoor garden or if you're just upkeeping the one that you have. There are some tips to conserve water and also just give your plants what they need instead of overwatering. On the next slide, I believe, is our Lawn Be Gone program. This is very popular. You can transform your lawn, only your lawn, into drought-resistant landscape. That might seem like a daunting task, but fortunately, Bosca also provides a list of drought-resistant plants, whether that's shrubs, grass, or trees. You can basically design your landscape how you would like, as long as half of the plants are on that list as drought-resistant. It qualifies for the Lawn Be Gone rebate program. Depending on your water supplier, depending on whether they participate, you could receive up to $1, between $1 and $4 per square foot of lawn replacement. Rain barrels. We also offer rain barrels. This item is what collects water off of your roof when it rains, and so instead of using water from your sink, using water from your hose, you collect it straight from the sky. You don't have to pay for it, it's free. And you also receive a rebate from your local water agency and San Mateo County. So half and half. Half comes from the county, half comes from your agency if they participate. But either way, you're getting at least $50 back on a 50-gallon storage rain barrel. Checking for leaks. Okay. There's a more detailed instruction and even a demonstration if you click on the link for the California Urban Water Conservation Council provided there on our webinar. Really easy leak detection though. If you go out to your water meter, put a toothpick on top of the needle, go turn your irrigation off, turn all the water off completely, and come back in 30 minutes. If the needle has moved, this likely indicates a leak, which means you need to have someone come out and test your meter. But also means that if you do replace your meter, you'll be saving a lot of water in the long run. Okay, so one of our examples is Cal Water. These are the programs that they offer. In addition to the high efficiency toilet and the washer rebates, they also offer what I've been talking about as the smart irrigation controller. That's the one that waters your lawn and waters your plants based on the weather and based on the climate. So it does all the work for you. You don't need to make any adjustments, and you get a rebate for it if you live in the Cal Water district. Cal Water also offers efficiency evaluations. They offer sprinkler nozzles for the end of your hose, and they offer turf removal, which is the Lawn Be Gone program. Some other agencies also offer these, and you can find that out on bosca.org. Another way to tackle water conservation is by taking landscaping classes. Bosca offers these for free, as well as other landscape education classes. And to find out when those classes are offered and which classes are available in the next month, you can visit bosca.org. Bay Area Gardening. That is the website that helps you decide how much to water your lawn, which plants need to be watered, how much they need to be watered, and when. That's called WaterWise Gardening. Definitely visit this link if you have a garden or if you're thinking about starting one. So to wrap up our presentation, water conservation benefits everyone. It makes sure that our water system is reliable. It reduces water and energy costs. It promotes efficient use of resources. And it benefits the environment, which contributes to community sustainability and health. In your question box, list a way in which you utilize water that you would like to reduce or eliminate.
Okay. I'm going to see if we have any responses, and I know it's 1 o'clock, so it's basically we're going to wrap things up here. I see one response: high efficiency sprinkler heads are available for free also. So that was a comment as one of the things that's available. Thank you so much, Megan, for the presentation. So we really appreciate you participating today and providing a lot of great information. There's so many rebates and programs available for water, so it's really great to see all of those. I'm going to wrap things up, but I want to let everybody know a couple quick things before we get off. First of all, at the bottom of your panel, there's a handout section that has many of the links that were in the presentation today. So before I end this webinar, please open up the handouts and click on it, because once you open it in PDF form on your computer, then you can save it to your own computer and you'll still have it. Otherwise, I know that Insu is going to be emailing everybody following this presentation in the next day or two, and she'll send you that handout, and I think she sent you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation or you can email her back and ask her for it. So we'll be in touch with you. The other thing that I want to alert you to is some of the other upcoming classes. So we have the Green Building and Water Conservation Workshop on March 26th. We have a Green Business Workshop on May 14th. And then again, the Sustainable Transportation is going to be starting, I think next week is the webinar, and then there's 2 more opportunities, one in April and one in May. So lots of information on that, and all you have to do is go to recycleworks.org, and then you look up at the classes, and they have those there. I did have another poll that I would love people to participate. I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to launch it really quick, and if you have if you can quickly respond if you are interested in any other information. If you're not, don't worry about it, but we always want to make sure that we're providing the most appropriate information for people that are interested in the community programs and what's going on. So I'll leave that up for another second or two if you have anything that you want to respond to really quick. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then the last thing is just if you have more information, please go ahead and contact Insue. Her email address is right there. We really do appreciate you joining us today. We know that 2 hours is a long time to sit at your computer, and we hope that you provided some information that'll be useful to you and that can help you get more connected to the county and Recycleworks and the programs that are being offered. So thank you so much on behalf of all of us for joining us today, and we'll hopefully see you soon.